Is the Teal Mask DLC for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet worth it? In short, I'd say yes, and here's why. The Teal Mask is the first of 2 DLCs for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. It is also the first piece of mainline content for Pokemon since Scarlet and Violet were released almost a year ago. The DLC takes place in the Kitakami region and includes a new storyline, new characters, and a new Pokedex. The storytelling feels very similar to the main game, which I think is a huge compliment. I'd say the story of the main game was one of the best in the entire franchise, and the DLC was a strong follow-up. In terms of the time it takes to complete this story, I've seen creators and chatters over on Twitch say that it took them between 6 and 10 hours. Personally, I was closer to the 6-hour end of the spectrum, but that was an incredibly story-focused playthrough. I think if you actually take time to explore the region and work on the decks a little bit more, you'll be closer to that 10+ hour mark. But after that, there are also a few fun side quests you can take on once you've wrapped up the main story. I'd say this is on par with how past DLC stories have been, like in Sword and Shield, and the playtime value is well worth the cost of the DLC, considering that there's another DLC coming in a few months. This DLC felt like a really solid setup for the Indigo Disc, and similar to the Isle of Armor to Crown Tundra progression, where DLC 1 features a little bit less content, but that's made up for with a much larger DLC 2. The DLC teasers for the Indigo Disc have also shown there will be tons of new and returning Pokemon, and presumably a grand conclusion to the story that is set up in the Teal Mask. So for all of the content you get in the Teal Mask, plus additional DLC, I'd say it's worth its value, but I'm also going to talk a little bit more in depth about the Pokedex. I think the Pokedex adds another great aspect to this DLC. The dex consists of 200 entries and brings a bunch of Pokemon back from previous generations, as well as a few new additions. Completing the Pokedex is another side quest that should probably add another 5-ish hours to your playtime, and it truly encourages you to explore every part of the region carefully. But perhaps the best part of this dex is that it doesn't actually require you to trade or own both copies of Scarlet and Violet to complete all of the entries. That's not to say that there aren't trade evolutions and version exclusives, but if you own a copy of either Sword or Shield, it doesn't matter which one, and either Brilliant Diamond or Legends, just one or the other, you can complete the decks all by yourself using Pokemon Home. The Terra Raids also add an interesting aspect to this DLC, as they reward you by offering some trade evolutions or otherwise rare Pokemon that can be difficult to catch or find. There are also fun rewards along the way for completing entries and a surprise after you catch all of the Pokemon in this Pokedex. And just a few final points to add. I think the DLC was a very nice fresh breath of air after lacking any real mainline content since Scarlet and Violet came out last November, and it seems like the Indigo Disc is going to be the only other piece of mainline content for the foreseeable future, considering that no other titles have been announced so far. I think it's a good way to pass the time and keep working on something new in Scarlet and Violet, since the games have personally felt a little bit stale to me recently. And I also think the promise of another DLC coming in December is a really huge bonus for getting this DLC now. But lastly, I do want to offer a few disclaimers before this video ends. While I do think the DLC is worth it and I found it to be pretty enjoyable, I do want to be transparent. First, if you did not like the main storyline of Scarlet and Violet, you probably will not like this DLC either. It feels very similar in the style of its storytelling, and I think that you won't like this story any more than you would have liked Scarlet and Violet. And second, by itself, this DLC could be considered a little bit underwhelming. While I had fun, if you play the game a ton or like to speed through these games, the DLC will only last you so long. But like I said, I would recommend playing through this a little bit more slowly and taking time to explore rather than just rushing to the finish line, because I think you'll be a little bit disappointed. But with those warnings in mind, I will close by saying that I think the Teal Mask and eventually the Indigo Disc will be well worth the price and add a really fun story and new challenges to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. And now I want to take a quick moment for saying thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or found it helpful at all, please consider dropping a like and subscribing to this channel. Also, you can catch me live over on my Twitch channel at I'mJamesLive_, where I'm live most days playing Pokemon and a ton of other games. I hope this video helped you and that you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the next one. I'm gonna go with the bacon next. I also overcooked this a little bit, so it's gonna be a very crunchy sandwich.